It's just a vacation, she said. Her voice dipped in that artificial sweetness she wore like perfume when she wanted something. Delilah always knew how to sound innocent, how to pitch her voice like she was offering the world a favor instead of a warning. I was in the middle of slicing bell peppers for dinner when she called. The sizzle of the skillet in the background felt too loud, too normal for what was coming. I thought it'd be good for Zariah to have some fun, she said. We're heading to the beach, me, Gregory, and the boys. Just a weekend thing. You know, bonding. She laughed, soft and controlled. Nothing crazy. Just sandcastles, ice cream, and sunscreen. Gregory's renting a place right on the water. I paused, hand hovering over the cutting board. Something in my chest tugged, instinct maybe, or experience. But then I heard Zariah's voice in the background. Daddy, I want to go. Please, can I go? Mommy said we'll see dolphins. And just like that, I caved. Because when your 8-year-old daughter sounds like joy is waiting on the other end of a yes, you swallow your suspicion and try not to be the villain. I told Delilah fine, and that I'd drop Zariah off Friday morning. She hummed her approval like I was doing her a favor, not giving up my weekend with my daughter. Perfect, she said, then hung up before I could ask any more questions. I looked down at my phone for a long moment after the call ended. The kitchen went quiet except for the occasional pop of oil in the pan. My chest felt heavy. I couldn't explain it, not fully. It wasn't jealousy. I was over Delilah in every way that counted. But I didn't trust her. Not with Zariah. Not with her moods or her new husband Gregory, whose smile never touched his eyes. Still, Zariah was bouncing off the walls that night as she packed her tiny roller bag with swimsuits, flip-flops, and her favorite pink sunglasses. I'm gonna build the biggest sandcastle ever, Daddy, she said, stuffing in her sketchpad and markers. And I'll bring you back a shell. I smiled, ruffled her curls, and told her to take pictures. She promised she would, holding up her little Polaroid camera like a badge of excitement. I kissed her forehead that night, lingered a little longer than usual, and tried not to let my stomach twist into knots I couldn't explain. Friday morning, I drove her over to Delilah's house. Gregory stood on the porch with his 2 sons, both a few years older than Zariah. They were matching bored shorts and bored expressions. Zariah ran ahead, her pink bag bumping behind her on the steps. She didn't even wait for me to park before she threw her arms around her mom. Delilah barely looked at me. She'll be fine, she called over her shoulder as she herded the kids inside. I'll text you when we get there. But she didn't. Not that day. Not the next either. My messages got short replies, mostly emojis or one-word answers. I didn't want to be the overbearing ex. I didn't want to teach Zariah fear by living in it. Still, I didn't sleep well. I kept imagining her little voice calling me from the shoreline or sitting on the backseat of Gregory's SUV, legs swinging, eyes wide, watching people she barely knew try to pretend they were family. Sunday evening, I got a text. On our way back. Can you be at the house at 7? I was already waiting outside by 6:45. Zariah didn't bounce out of the car like she usually did. She slid out slowly, hoodie pulled low over her head, even though it was nearly 90 degrees. No waves, no giggles. Just a slumped posture and silence. She clutched her sketchpad to her chest like it was the only thing holding her together. Gregory didn't even bother to get out of the car. He stared straight ahead, engine still running. Delilah walked her to the curb and said, "She's a little tired. Rough night. You know how kids are." Zariah wouldn't meet my eyes. Her little hands gripped my shirt when I reached for her. I gave Delilah a nod, stiff, formal, and walked my daughter to the car. Her silence screamed the entire way home. Once inside, I asked gently, "Did you have fun?" She didn't answer. She just kicked off her shoes and went straight to her room, closing the door softly behind her. Not slamming it, which would have made more sense, just closing it like she didn't want to make any more noise in the world. I gave her a little time. 10 minutes. Then 20. Then 30. Finally, I knocked and cracked the door. She was curled on the bed, hoodie still on, hugging her pillow like it was the only thing left that hadn't turned on her. I stepped in, sat on the edge of the mattress. Zariah. She wouldn't look at me. I reached out, gently tugging at the edge of the hood. "Baby, what happened?" She flinched at first, then let me pull it back. I froze. Bald. Her beautiful curls gone. Her scalp was raw in places, patchy, like it had been yanked, not trimmed. My breath caught in my throat as I stared at my little girl, who now looked like a stranger in her own skin. Tears welled in her eyes, but she didn't speak. Zariah, what? Who did this? My voice was already cracking. She swallowed hard, then whispered, Mom said I looked like you now. A loser. Her voice shattered something in me I didn't even know could still break. She said, it'll grow back. But I should stop being such a spoiled brat. Her bottom lip trembled. Gregory's kids laughed. They said I looked like an alien. One of them took a picture. I asked Mommy to make them stop, and she told me to grow thicker skin. I reached for her, pulling her close. She sobbed against my chest, small and broken, and so far from the girl who'd promised to bring me back a shell. I held her tighter. This wasn't just a vacation. It was the beginning of war. She didn't speak much the next morning. When I made her pancakes, her favorite, with chocolate chips shaped into smiley faces, she only poked at them with her fork. Her hoodie was still on, drawn tight around her face despite the early summer heat creeping in through the kitchen windows. Outside, the world looked normal. Birds chirped. The neighbor's sprinkler arced across their lawn. But inside, something had shifted. My daughter sat hunched at the table, her eyes low, her body pulled in like she wanted to disappear. I kept trying. Want to go to the bookstore today? They might have the next Jasmine Fox comic in. She shook her head slowly, eyes still fixed on her plate. Maybe we hit the park after. Remember the duck with the crooked foot? He might still be there, limping around like he owns the place. A whisper of a smile tugged at her lips, but it died as quickly as it appeared. That fragile flicker told me something deeper was still broken. Not just embarrassment. Not just sadness. She was ashamed. And ashamed of what? Hair. No, what they made her believe about herself. I decided to wait a little longer before bringing it up again, let her move at her own pace. But then the sun started pushing through the blinds, lighting up the kitchen tile, and I saw sweat gathering at her temples. She wiped at it quickly, glancing at me to see if I noticed. I didn't say anything. Not yet. I cleaned the table, humming a little. A melody she liked from one of her cartoons. She didn't hum along this time. When I was done, I walked around the table slowly, knelt beside her chair, and gently reached for the string of her hood. Her arms shot up fast. No. Her voice cracked the quiet like glass. She gripped the edge of her hood, breathing fast, like someone had just cornered her in a room without windows. My hands froze in the air. I didn't push. Okay, I said soft. Okay, you don't have to. I just want to make sure you're not burning up in that thing. She looked away, blinking fast. Her small hands trembled. Sweetheart, I said, keeping my voice calm. I already saw, remember? Yesterday. She didn't answer. Your hair's not who you are. You know that, right? Again, silence. I sat down beside her, not pushing anymore. Just being near. Sometimes presence is louder than words. I waited. Then finally, after maybe 5 minutes that felt like 30, she whispered, It's worse today. I blinked. Worse. She nodded. I tilted my head, gently brushing a hand over hers. Can I see? She hesitated, chewing her lip. Then, after a moment of quiet, she slowly pushed the hood back. My breath caught. There were new marks, scratches near her left ear. The skin was red, irritated. Someone had done more than just cut her hair. They'd scraped her scalp, probably using clippers without the right guard. Maybe on purpose. Maybe out of cruelty. Either way, it wasn't an accident. Zariah blinked up at me, tears brimming now. They said I look like you now. A loser. That Mommy said so. My chest cracked open. She said it so quietly, so matter-of-fact, like it wasn't even shocking anymore. Like she'd accepted it as truth. I'm sorry, I whispered. I'm so sorry. Her bottom lip quivered. They laughed. Juno took a video. I was crying, and he was laughing. I told Mommy, and she told me to stop whining. I felt a fire rising in me. Not just anger, rage. But I couldn't show her that. Not now. Not when she needed peace. I swallowed it down like poison, letting it sit in my chest while I focused on her. She said, Zariah added, voice breaking. I needed to learn how to not be dramatic. That I was acting like you. Like that was a bad thing. I pulled her into my arms, held her like she was made of glass, kissed the top of her exposed head. I wanted to cry, but I didn't. Not because I wasn't broken inside, but because I needed her to see strength in me. Not control, not false bravado, but grounded, centered strength. The kind that tells a child, you're safe here, even if the world doesn't make sense. You're nothing like what they said, I whispered. You're strong. You're smart. You're funny. You're kind. You're the best part of me, Zariah. The best thing I've ever done in this life. Don't ever let anyone, especially not her, make you feel small. She sobbed again, harder this time. The kind of crying that comes from a place too deep to name. Her little arms gripped me tight, nails digging into my back, and I let her hold on as long as she needed. When she finally pulled back, she wiped her face with the sleeve of her hoodie. Do I have to go back there? She asked, voice small. No, I said immediately. You never do. She nodded like she was trying to believe me. After a quiet afternoon, cartoons, juice boxes, and drawing in the living room, she finally fell asleep on the couch, her head on a pillow, hoodie still on but slightly looser now. I watched her for a long time, trying to figure out how someone could harm a child and call it parenting. Trying to understand how Delilah, once a woman I loved, could look at this little girl and say those things. I didn't sleep that night. I sat at the table, staring at the old savings account I still had partial access to, the deed to the house with my name still tied to it, and every financial thread I had quietly left untouched out of decency, out of civility, out of peace. That was before. Now, it was war. Delilah opened the door with a smile too wide to be real, like she'd been practicing it in the mirror and still couldn't get the eyes to match. The smile faded just a hair when she saw me standing there alone, hands at my sides, jaw clenched. Well, she said, tilting her head, this is a surprise. I'm not here to surprise you, I said, stepping into the house without waiting for an invitation. Where's Zariah's hair? She rolled her eyes like I was asking about a misplaced sock. Oh my God, you're still on that, she scoffed, walking ahead into the living room. It's just hair, Malik. It'll grow back. She was being dramatic, as usual. I followed her in slowly, eyes scanning the place like it had become foreign overnight. The same beige walls, the same artless furniture, but now everything looked smaller, meaner, colder. Maybe it always had been. Maybe I just hadn't wanted to see it. She's 8, I said. 8 years old and crying herself to sleep. Refusing to eat. Scared to take off a hoodie because she was humiliated. That's not drama. That's trauma. Delilah plopped onto the couch like we were having coffee. You're so sensitive. Always have been. She needed humbling. You coddle her. She gets that wounded puppy energy from you. Honestly, you should be thanking me. I stared at her, trying to process the words as they left her mouth. She said them with the same tone someone might use to talk about recycling or grocery shopping. Casual. Detached. Like none of it mattered. Then Gregory came down the stairs. He was wearing one of those smug athletic polos that looked too tight around the arms, like he wanted the fabric to know he had muscles. He raised an eyebrow at me, then gave Delilah a lazy grin. Everything all right down here? He asked. We're fine, she replied, not even glancing at him. I'm not, I said flatly, turning toward him. You were there. You let your grown sons, mock my daughter. One of them took a video. Laughed while she cried. You think that's fine? Gregory shrugged like the accusation didn't even touch him. Boys tease. Kids do dumb stuff. It wasn't that deep. It was deep to her. He leaned against the banister. Well, maybe if she weren't so soft. The room went quiet. I took a slow breath, every part of me telling me to walk out before I did something I couldn't take back. But I didn't move. Not yet. Delilah looked up at me with that dismissive smirk she always used when she wanted to make you feel small. She's just like you, Malik. Overly sensitive. Always the victim. A little hair off and suddenly it's the end of the world. She didn't just lose hair, I said, voice calm but tight. She lost trust. Dignity. Safety. She thought you were taking her to the beach. You let them hurt her. Delilah snorted. You act like I shaved her bald and threw her in the ocean. I tilted my head. Did you shave her head? She was throwing a tantrum, she said, shrugging. Refused to put on sunscreen. Wouldn't get in the water. Wouldn't even smile for pictures. So I told her to stop acting like a spoiled brat. Gregory said it was probably because she spends too much time with you, always babying her. Then she said she hated it here and missed you. And honestly, that was the final straw. Gregory chuckled. So she got a trim. Big deal. It wasn't a trim, I said through gritted teeth. It was a punishment. Delilah stood now, crossing her arms. You always make yourself the hero. But you're not. You're just bitter because she likes being with us more. She begged me not to make her go back. Her eyes flinched for a moment. Just a flicker, but I saw it. She's a child. Children don't know what they want. She knew enough to cry for 2 days straight. She'll get over it. Not this time, I said quietly. You crossed a line. She rolled her eyes again, but there was less confidence in it now. Oh, please. What are you going to do? Drag me to court over a haircut? No, I said, taking one slow step toward her. I'm going to make sure you never have the power to hurt her again. You want to play games? Fine. But don't forget, I know everything. I know about the accounts, the house, the lies. Her smirk returned, but it was shaky now. Empty threats, Malik. You've always talked more than you act. I looked at Gregory. You think this is funny? He shrugged. You're just mad you don't control her anymore. I smiled. Just once. Sharp. Control's a funny thing. You don't notice how much of it you have until someone like me decides to take it back. Gregory laughed. What? You gonna march in with your spreadsheets and lawyer friends? No. I'm going to bleed you slowly. Not with fists. With facts. With documentation. With every asset, every clause, every cent you forgot to read in the paperwork. Delilah's voice snapped now. You wouldn't dare. I already have, I said. And with that, I turned and walked out. Calm. No yelling. No threats thrown over my shoulder. Just silence. But inside, my hands were shaking. Because I'd seen the scissors behind her smile. And now, I was done playing nice. The house was quiet when I got back. Zariah was asleep in her room, curled up under the patchwork quilt her Aunt Amara had made for her last Christmas. She was still wearing the hoodie, but her breathing had finally evened out. I stood there in her doorway for a long time, watching the slow rise and fall of her chest, the moonlight painting soft lines across her face. All I could think about was how she'd looked when I pulled that hood back, how her eyes hadn't held a single ounce of the spark I knew. They'd hollowed out, and it was because of them. That was the night something in me turned. Snapped, maybe, but not in a loud, reckless way. This wasn't about revenge. It wasn't even about anger anymore. This was about protection, about clarity, about finally stepping off the line I tiptoed for too long, for peace, for appearances, for civility. They'd mistaken my silence for weakness, and I was done being quiet. I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop open and a cold cup of coffee untouched beside me. The clock blinked 2:13 a.m. in dull blue digits. My cursor hovered over the joint savings account that Delilah never remembered to remove my name from. For years, I hadn't touched it. I'd left it there, a courtesy. She liked to call it leftover goodwill, as if that money wasn't half mine. But she'd been using it like a bottomless slush fund ever since Gregory came into the picture. Spa weekends, fancy dinners, even the damn beach trip. I didn't hesitate this time. Transfer full balance. My checking account. Click. Done. Next came the mortgage. Her house. Well, technically ours. The deed still had both our names on it. Another thing she'd assumed I'd never act on. When we divorced, she begged me not to force a sale. Said Zariah needed consistency. And I'd agreed, because back then, I still believed in shared dignity. I still believed she was capable of doing what was right for our daughter. I logged into the bank's property management portal and scrolled down to the autopay section. Every month, I've been covering the difference after her payments came up short. Quietly. No reminders. No thanks. Disable autopay. Done. I watched the status shift to inactive. My thumb tapped the table rhythmically, slow, steady. There was no rush of adrenaline, no burst of triumph. Just stillness. Like the air after a storm. I knew exactly what I was doing. And I didn't feel guilty about it for a second. Then came the credit cards. She had 2 under my name, leftovers from when we shared an account, and she swore she'd transfer her balance soon. She never did. I'd ignored the charges out of habit, paid them when they came, filed them away. Until now. I logged in and froze both cards. One click. That was all it took. I didn't call her. I didn't text. I didn't leave a note or a warning. Because this wasn't a negotiation anymore. She had violated something sacred. Zariah wasn't just my daughter. She was my everything. My center. My reason. And Delilah had treated her like a pawn in whatever toxic game she thought she was playing. I closed the laptop and leaned back, exhaling for what felt like the first time all day. It wasn't even satisfaction I felt. It was just a settling in my bones. The quiet kind. The kind that doesn't need applause or a witness. The fridge hummed softly in the corner. Outside, a car passed on the street, its tires whispering along the asphalt. And in the back of my mind, I knew the avalanche I just started wouldn't take long to reach them. Gregory's finances were a mess. I knew that because Delilah had once let it slip during a bitter rant. Something about him maxing out his own cards and having to borrow hers to cover his truck payment. She said it like it was funny, like it was cute. She'd laughed as if that wasn't her storm forming. I'd let them play house on my dime long enough. When the sun finally started to creep in through the blinds, I made myself a fresh cup of coffee and waited. Zariah came out around 8:30, rubbing her eyes and dragging her blanket behind her. The hoodie was still on, but I noticed the sleeves had been pushed up this time. A small thing, but it meant something. "Morning, love," I said gently. She curled up beside me on the couch without a word. I wrapped an arm around her and turned on her favorite cartoon. We sat like that for a while. Just the two of us, the screen flickering, her head resting against my side. The world felt like it had settled into something honest again, even if only for a moment. My phone buzzed at 9:12 a.m. I didn't have to look to know who it was, but I did. A message from Delilah. "What the hell did you do?" I smiled. I didn't answer. 10 minutes later, a call. I let it ring. Then another. And another. I waited until the fourth one before finally answering. "What the hell is going on, Malik?" Her voice hit me like a swarm of bees. Loud, panicked, furious. "My card declined at the grocery store. The bank says the savings account is empty. And what the hell is this about the mortgage? They're saying it's unpaid for the month." I took a sip of my coffee. "Delilah," I said, calm as a lake. "You remember last weekend? That little vacation you took my daughter on? The one where you let grown boys humiliate her and then shaved her head when she didn't smile enough for your Instagram photos." She went quiet. "I remember," I said. "And now, so will you? You can't just—" "I already did. You're ruining my life." I let that hang for a moment, then said, "No, you did that yourself. I just stopped paying the bill." Then I ended the call. Zariah looked up at me from the couch, eyes curious but calm. "Everything okay?" she asked. I smiled down at her, brushed a loose curl from her forehead. "Everything's finally just getting started." The first time Zariah refused dinner, I thought maybe she was just tired. The second night, I started to worry. By the third, when she pushed her favorite chicken noodle soup away and said she wasn't hungry, I knew we'd stepped into deeper water. I watched her from across the table, her face hidden beneath the hood again. She wasn't wearing it because of shame anymore, not exactly. It had become armor. Her silence was no longer just grief. It was protection, self-preservation. Her body was in the room, but something inside her was still stuck on that beach house porch, still hearing those kids laugh, still feeling the burn of betrayal from the one person who was supposed to protect her. I tried coaxing her, gently. "Just a few bites, baby. You'll feel better." She shook her head without lifting it. "Not hungry." I nodded, swallowing the ache. "Okay, that's all right." After I tucked her into bed that night, I stepped into the hallway and texted Amara. "Me, can you come tomorrow?" "She's shutting down." "Amara, already packing. I'll be there by noon." Amara had always been Zariah's safe person. My younger sister. Fierce, funny, full of warmth. She'd been the first to call Delilah a manipulator years ago, long before I could admit it. Zariah adored her. And right now, I needed reinforcements. The next day, Amara showed up with a suitcase full of books, snacks, and art supplies. She walked through the door like she was arriving at a summer camp. "Where's my girl?" she said, loud enough for Zariah to hear from her bedroom. Zariah peeked out from the hallway, hesitant. Amara grinned and dropped to her knees. "You gonna keep me waiting out here like a nobody?" Zariah blinked. Then, slowly, she walked over and buried herself in Amara's arms. For the first time in days, I saw her eyes close in comfort. Amara stayed for the weekend. She cooked with Zariah, read to her, helped her make paper flowers and string them across her bedposts. She didn't push her to talk, didn't force smiles. She just stayed close and steady, exactly what Zariah needed. But even then, the shadows didn't leave. Zariah would go silent in the middle of laughter. She'd flinch when a phone rang or a door slammed too hard. And she never once took off the hoodie. Not even at bedtime. On Sunday afternoon, I made a decision. I called Dr. Maribel Stone, a child psychologist I'd worked with through the community center. She'd helped kids through worse and came highly recommended for trauma cases. She met with us on Monday in her cozy home office that smelled like jasmine and old books. Zariah clung to my hand as we walked in, her grip small but tight. Dr. Stone crouched down to her level immediately. "Hey there, Zariah. I'm Maribel. You don't have to talk if you don't want to." but I do have a really comfy couch and the world's best coloring pins. Zariah didn't respond, but she gave a tiny nod. I stepped out while they talked. Or rather, while Maribel talked and Zariah sat quietly on the edge of her seat. I watched from the small glass window in the door, heart pounding like I was the one on trial. After the session, Maribel walked out alone and gently closed the door behind her. "She's in there drawing," she said. "Won't let me see it yet, but she's safe." I nodded. "Is she okay?" Maribel looked at me carefully. "She's been emotionally wounded. Her trust was broken by someone she depended on. What happened with her mother? It's not just a bad memory. It was a betrayal of safety. She's internalized shame, confusion, and self-worth issues. That's why she's not eating, not talking." I swallowed hard. "How do I fix it?" "You don't fix this, Malik. You hold space for it. You show her she's safe now. And you keep doing what you're doing, getting her help, staying steady, being present. But more than anything, she needs to know this wasn't her fault. She said she feels like a loser, like me," I said softly. "That's what Delilah told her." Maribel's expression darkened. "That's not parenting. That's emotional abuse." I nodded. I already knew it, but hearing someone else say it out loud made the reality hit deeper. She placed a hand on my shoulder. "She's got a long road ahead. But the fact that she has you, that's the best shot she's got." That night, after I tucked her in and Amara kissed her forehead, I sat with her for a few minutes, just holding her hand. She whispered, "Do you think it'll ever grow back?" I brushed a hand over her scalp, gentle as a breeze. "It will. Every single strand. And stronger." She paused. "I don't want people to laugh at me." "They won't," I said. "And if they do, they won't get close enough to do it again." She looked up at me, eyes big and glassy. "We bought wigs at the store today." "I know," I said. "I didn't like any." "That's okay." She took a breath, barely audible. "They'll know it's fake." I leaned down and kissed her forehead. "They'll know you're brave." Her hand tightened around mine. And in that quiet, I knew I just made a vow. Not with words, but with everything I had. I would never let her be hurt like that again. Not by Delilah. Not by anyone. Not while I was still breathing. It was the question that broke me. She asked it just after I tucked her in, her voice so quiet it barely made it across the room. I had been smoothing the edge of her blanket, adjusting the stuffed bear that had once traveled with her everywhere but now sat stiffly beside her like a forgotten relic. Her eyes were wide open, staring up at the ceiling like she was trying to count every star she couldn't see. I just said, "I love you, Peanut. I'll be right down the hall." And she whispered, "Why did Mommy hate me?" My hand froze. At first, I didn't think I heard her right. But when I looked at her, really looked, there was no confusion. No curiosity, even. Just devastation. It wasn't a question fueled by a child's misunderstanding. It was something she'd carried inside her for days, maybe longer, letting it rot and fester, until it spilled out into the dark room between us. I sat back down on the edge of her bed and tried to swallow around the knot rising in my throat. "She doesn't hate you, Zariah," I started. But even as the words left my mouth, they tasted like a lie. She blinked slowly, one tear sliding down the side of her face and into her hairline. Then why'd she say those things? Why'd she cut my hair and call me a loser? Why'd she laugh when Juno made fun of me? I had no answer that made any kind of sense. Because there was no logic to cruelty. No reason a mother would carve away her own daughter's dignity and call it discipline. I had tried for years to believe that Delilah was just overwhelmed, just broken in her own way, but that belief had cost me too much. It had cost Zariah something I couldn't replace. I reached for her hand and held it between both of mine. "Sometimes," I said slowly, "people do really hurtful things because they haven't dealt with their own pain. They carry it like poison, and instead of healing, they pour it into other people, especially the ones closest to them." She turned her head toward me. "Like Mommy." "Yeah," I said softly. "Like Mommy. Did she do that to you too?" I smiled, but it didn't reach my eyes. She tried. "Did it work?" "No," I said. "Because I had you." Her eyes welled again, and she pulled my hand to her cheek. "I don't want to see her again." I nodded slowly. "You don't have to. I promise." She was quiet for a long time after that. Her breathing eventually deepened, her fingers still wrapped around mine as she drifted into a sleep that didn't seem peaceful, just necessary. I sat there long after she dozed off, listening to the faint whir of her fan, watching the rise and fall of her chest like it was the only thing keeping me tethered. When I finally stood and left the room, I felt like I'd aged a decade. My heart ached, but something colder had started forming beneath the pain. Resolve. A sharp edge where softness used to live. I didn't just want Delilah out of our lives, I wanted her held accountable. And that meant more than pulling financial strings or cutting off resources. That meant court. That meant records. That meant custody. I called my attorney the next morning. Full custody? He asked, repeating it like he needed to hear it again to believe it. Yes, I said. And supervised visits, if any. I want documentation of what's happened. Psychological evaluations. Testimony if necessary. I'm not letting my daughter go through this again. There was a pause on the line. Then, all right. We'll need to start building a case. Do you have any messages, photos, anything that proves emotional harm? I have everything, I said. Screenshots. Texts. Videos of the haircut aftermath. Zariah's testimony. And I've already taken her to Dr. Maribel Stone. We're getting written reports. He whistled low. You came prepared. I'm done asking nicely. He got to work right away. Paperwork. Motions. Formal documentation that painted the truth Delilah had spent years trying to twist. The truth was ugly, but it was ours. It was Zariah's. And I was going to hold it up in front of the world like a shield. Delilah must have sensed the shift, because by midweek she was calling nonstop again. Her messages ranged from pleading, let's be reasonable, Malik, to threatening, I'll make sure the judge hears my side. One even said, you're weaponizing your daughter against me. That's abuse. I didn't respond to any of it. I let the silence do the talking. The next time Zariah came into the kitchen, she wasn't wearing her hoodie. Her head was still bare, but she held herself a little straighter. She didn't speak much, but she poured her own cereal and sat at the table with a book in front of her. It was a small step, but it was hers. Amara noticed it too. Look at you, she said gently. Reading before breakfast? That's some scholar behavior. Zariah cracked a tiny smile. That afternoon, we went to the library. She didn't want to go in at first, afraid someone would laugh. So I offered to go in first and check the space. When she finally stepped inside, I saw the librarian smile warmly at her and offer a sticker sheet. Zariah took it with a soft, thank you, and tucked it into her notebook. That evening, when I sat beside her during one of Maribel's sessions, she quietly told the doctor, I don't think it's my fault anymore. Maribel glanced at me and smiled gently. That's a very brave thing to say. Zariah nodded, then added, I think Mommy's the one who's broken. It wasn't said with anger. It wasn't even said with sadness. Just clarity. And that's when I knew she was healing. Bit by bit, day by day. And now that I had seen that, truly seen her inching back to herself, I knew what I had to do next. I wasn't just cutting Delilah off financially. I was going to remove her completely from the court's protection, from any legal gray area she might crawl into, from our lives. She made her choice. Now, I was making mine. The first time she called that morning, I didn't pick up. The second time, I muted the phone and kept helping Zariah tie the laces on her sneakers. By the third call, the ringtone was vibrating against the counter with such fury it almost sounded like a warning. But I waited. I let it keep buzzing while Zariah adjusted her headband in the mirror. She'd chosen a purple one with tiny silver stars. Her idea. Her reflection still made her flinch sometimes, but today she stood a little taller. That mattered more than anything else. When she finally ran off to grab her backpack, I picked up the phone, pressed it to my ear, and said nothing. Malik. Delilah's voice came through strained and sharp. Not the sugary, sarcastic tone she usually used. This one was raw, unpolished. You froze everything. I can't pay the bank. The store declined my card. The mortgage didn't go through. What the hell is happening? I stared at the kitchen wall. At the list Zariah had drawn with Amara last night, small stars for every good day she had. 3 in a row so far. They're going to take the house, Delilah shrieked. I have 2 kids, Malik. You can't just leave us like this. I could almost hear her pacing. I could picture it. Her phone clutched in one hand, fury painted across her face, the polished control she prided herself on crumbling like old plaster. Gregory in the background, probably too proud to admit he'd failed to provide. It was always easier for them to blame me than face their own decay. You should have thought about that, I said, voice calm and cold, before you made our daughter feel worthless. Her breath caught. She wasn't expecting that. She'd expected pleading, maybe negotiation, but not this. You're being ridiculous, she snapped. It was just hair. You're acting like I threw her off a bridge. She cried herself to sleep for 5 nights, I said. She asked me if you hated her. She stopped eating. She hasn't smiled without permission in days. And you're worried about your credit score. There was silence. Then, Gregory's kids need a roof over their heads too. I blinked. That wasn't a mistake. That wasn't her misspeaking. That was her prioritizing, naming them before her own daughter. They're not my responsibility, I said flatly. You've always been selfish, she spat. Even when we were married. Always playing the victim, like the world owes you something. No, I said. I just stopped letting you write the script. I hung up before she could answer. That afternoon, the formal foreclosure letter was delivered. I saw the signature from the bank's attorney, someone I knew from a community fundraiser last year. The irony didn't escape me. Delilah had always walked through life with this arrogant air like nothing could touch her, like appearances were everything and reality was optional. Now reality was sitting on her doorstep with a legal seal. By evening, she called again. This time, I let it go to voicemail. The message was laced with panic. I need a week, Malik. Just 1 week to fix things. I didn't mean to hurt her. I swear. I was just tired. Frustrated. You don't know what it's like having everything fall on you all the time. Please. I'll do better. I'll apologize. Don't do this. But it wasn't an apology. It was a negotiation masked as regret. I forwarded the message to my attorney. Every word mattered now. The next morning, he filed the emergency motion. Full custody, expedited hearing. Included in the filing. Maribel's report, a transcript of Zariah's testimony, financial abuse documentation, and the video Gregory's son had posted briefly on social media before deleting it. Zariah sobbing, hood half off, while a boy zoomed in and laughed. By Wednesday, I got the notification. Hearing scheduled, Judge Colton Vega. Vega wasn't known for patience. He was blunt, measured, and detested parental negligence. Delilah had no idea what kind of battlefield she was about to step onto. I didn't tell Zariah all the details, just that we were going to talk to a judge about making sure she never had to go anywhere she didn't want to again. She didn't say anything at first, just nodded and leaned into my side. Can Amara come too? Of course, I said. She'll be right there with us. The night before the hearing, I stood in the hallway outside Zariah's room. She was asleep with the purple headband still in place. She'd drawn another star on her good day chart. 4 in a row. I thought about everything I'd once tolerated in the name of civility, how I let Delilah chip away at my presence in my daughter's life just to keep peace. How I swallowed insults, forgave cruelty, paid bills without question, and smiled in court-mandated meetings for shared parenting goals. But that was over. Delilah could scream all she wanted. She could cry about her house, her lifestyle, her reputation. I didn't care if she fell. I only cared that she didn't drag Zariah down with her. And now? She couldn't. Because I was finally holding the line. The day of the hearing arrived with a cold clarity. There wasn't a cloud in the sky, but the air carried that weight, the kind you feel in courtrooms and cemeteries. I dressed Zariah in her soft pink sweater and navy blue skirt, her request. She even picked out the matching pink clip to go with the tiny sprouts of hair starting to peek along her scalp. She'd said quietly, I want to look brave. And she did. I wore a gray suit. Not flashy, just solid, reliable. The kind of presence a daughter could look at and feel anchored by. Amara met us at the courthouse steps, her hand slipping into Zariah's as we walked through the metal detectors. Inside, the fluorescent lights buzzed low above our heads, and every hallway smelled like paper and tension. My lawyer, Grant Pearson, met us outside courtroom 3C with a stack of files and calm steel in his voice. Judge Vega runs a tight ship, he said. He'll move quickly. Stay composed. We have the documentation. We have the therapist reports. We have the video. She doesn't have a leg to stand on. I nodded. Zariah gripped my hand tighter. Delilah arrived 7 minutes late. She came in wearing a charcoal pantsuit, her hair freshly blown out, heels sharp enough to stab. Her lipstick was perfect. Her nails matched her shoes. But her eyes gave it away. She looked at me the way people look at the last thread holding the curtain up, hoping it won't snap while secretly knowing it already has. Gregory wasn't with her. I knew why. After the foreclosure hit, he'd filed a formal separation to keep his name off the sinking ship. Cowardice in designer shoes. When she sat down across from us, her gaze drifted to Zariah. And for a moment, just a flicker, I saw something like shame in her face. But then it was gone, swallowed by defensiveness. The bailiff called our case. We stood. Inside, the courtroom felt colder than the lobby. Judge Colton Vega didn't look up when we entered. He was flipping through papers with reading glasses perched low on his nose. He was bald, square-jawed, no nonsense. When he finally looked up, he stared straight at Delilah. "Miss Bennett," he said flatly. "Quite a file I've read." "Mr. Carter," he turned to me with a brief nod. "Thank you for being prompt." We sat. Grant opened by laying everything out in clear, chronological order. The financial support I had been providing since the divorce, the existence of my name on the mortgage, the evidence of Delilah's misuse of joint funds. Then he brought in Maribel's letter, Zariah's emotional withdrawal, trauma symptoms, refusal to eat or socialize after the beach trip. He showed the video, only 10 seconds, but long enough. Zariah sobbing, Juno laughing, Delilah in the background, doing nothing. When it ended, the courtroom was silent. Then Vega turned to Delilah. "Do you deny this took place?" She cleared her throat. "Your Honor, children exaggerate. It was a haircut." She was being defiant. She refused to engage with the family. And yes, there was discipline, but it wasn't abuse. Vega blinked slowly. "You consider shaving an 8-year-old girl's head for being defiant discipline?" She was having an attitude. "Gregory and I were trying to get her to participate, and she made a scene." He leaned forward. "So you punished a child by altering her physical appearance in a humiliating way, and then allowed others in the home to mock her, record her, and post it online?" Delilah's voice wavered. "I didn't post it, but you allowed it to happen." She faltered. "It wasn't my intent." Vega turned toward Zariah. "Young lady, would you be willing to speak to me? Just for a moment?" Zariah looked up at me, nervous. I nodded gently, and she stood. Amara gave her hand a tiny squeeze as she walked slowly to the bench. Vega softened his voice. "Zariah, I'm very sorry this happened to you. I want you to know that nothing that happened is your fault. You did nothing wrong." Zariah nodded. "Did your mom explain to you why she cut your hair?" Zariah's voice was barely above a whisper. "She said I was acting like daddy, that I needed to learn how to be normal." Vega's face tightened. "And how did that make you feel?" Zariah didn't hesitate. Like I didn't matter. Like she wished I wasn't her daughter. That silence again, thick, suffocating, louder than anything words could have filled. Vega cleared his throat and leaned back. "Thank you, sweetheart. You may sit." Zariah walked back to me. I bent low, wrapped my arms around her, and whispered, "You were amazing." She nodded into my shoulder, and I could feel her body trembling. Vega turned to Delilah. "Ms. Bennett, your actions were beyond negligent. They were emotionally abusive, reckless, and entirely unjustified. You have demonstrated a pattern of using your child as a tool to exercise control over your ex-spouse and a shocking disregard for the psychological well-being of your daughter." Delilah opened her mouth to speak, but he raised a hand. "Enough. I've heard more than I needed." He turned toward me. "Mr. Carter, full physical and legal custody is granted to you, effective immediately. Ms. Bennett, you will have no unsupervised contact with the child. Any visitation must be approved by a licensed family counselor after evidence of progress and compliance with court-mandated therapy." Delilah gasped. "You can't." "I can," Vega interrupted. "And I just did." The gavel came down with a final, heavy thud. I didn't celebrate. I didn't cheer. I just closed my eyes and breathed. It was over. Outside the courthouse, Delilah stood on the steps, her hand shaking as she dialed someone, probably Gregory. She didn't look at us. Zariah didn't look at her. Amara wrapped her arm around Zariah as we walked toward the car. My daughter was quiet, but there was something different in her silence now. It wasn't the silence of fear. It was the silence that comes after thunder, when you know the storm has passed and all you have left is the rebuilding. She reached up and grabbed my hand as we walked. "I don't have to go back?" I squeezed her fingers. "Never again. Some mornings sneak up on you like a gift you didn't expect to unwrap." That day was like that. The sunlight poured in through the kitchen windows with no resistance, catching on the edges of the fridge magnets and bouncing off the cereal bowl Zariah had left out the night before. I was standing at the stove flipping pancakes when I heard her footsteps. Slow at first, then picking up like she was chasing something inside her. "Daddy," she said. I turned. She was standing in the hallway, blinking against the morning light. Her pajama shirt was wrinkled, but there was something new in her posture. She was smiling, really smiling. Not a careful one, not the kind that asks for permission before it appears. She took a step closer, tilting her head like she had a secret. "Daddy, it's growing back." It took me a second to understand. She turned her head slightly and pointed to the soft fuzz blooming across her scalp, tiny curls rising defiantly toward the ceiling like they'd been waiting for their moment. The pink headband she wore was gently nudging the new hair forward. She didn't have the hood on. She hadn't touched it in days. But this was the first time she said it aloud, acknowledged the regrowth, not just of her hair, but of herself. My smile came slow and full. "Look at that," I whispered. "I told you." Stronger than ever. She nodded. I didn't want to look at it at first. But last night, I turned the mirror toward the window so the light could hit just right. I saw the curls. She walked into the kitchen and opened the cabinet for her favorite mug, the purple one with the chipped lip. "Can I have hot cocoa?" "You can have whatever you want, superstar." I watched her stir the powder with a steady hand, adding the milk just the way Amara taught her. She reached for the tiny marshmallows, counting them out carefully. When she sat down, she didn't hunch. She didn't shrink. She sipped with one hand and started humming with the other, tapping out a rhythm on the tabletop. The sound, God, I hadn't realized how much I missed it. That little melody she used to hum when she colored or daydreamed. The one that used to float through the car rides and bubble baths. For weeks, I hadn't heard it at all. But now, it filled the room like sunlight. After breakfast, we drove to school. It was her first day back after nearly 3 weeks. She'd missed a field trip, 2 birthday parties, and a music recital. But now, she sat in the back seat with her backpack zipped and her shoulders squared. "Are you nervous?" I asked as I pulled into the parking lot. "A little," she admitted. "But I'm also excited. Remember what we talked about?" She nodded. "If someone asks, I tell the truth I want to tell. And if they're mean, I walk away. And if they're kind, I smile." We pulled up to the curb. Her teacher, Ms. Hargrove, stood by the front gate, waving at the kids as they arrived. When she saw Zariah, her face lit up. "Welcome back, Miss Carter," she called. Zariah smiled and unbuckled her seatbelt. Before she got out, she turned to me. "What if they ask why my hair's short?" I looked at her carefully. "What would you want to say?" She shrugged. I could say, "I cut it to try something brave." I felt my throat tighten. "That's perfect." She opened the door and climbed out. As she walked toward the building, a few kids looked her way. One girl leaned in to whisper to another. But Zariah didn't flinch. She straightened her shoulders and kept walking. That evening, when I picked her up, she climbed into the car with flushed cheeks and a grin so wide it looked like summer. "How'd it go?" I asked. "I told them I cut it on purpose," she said. "For a change. For courage. And they said it looked cool. Tyler said I looked like a superhero in training." I laughed. He's not wrong. That night, she drew again. Something she hadn't done in weeks. She sat at the table with her colored pencils, tongue poking out in concentration. When she finished, she held it up, a drawing of herself, standing on top of a hill, wearing a pink cape, hair short, head held high. She titled it, "The Brave Girl." Amara framed it the next day. At school, Zariah started answering more questions. She volunteered to help pass out papers. She stood up in music class and played the tambourine during a rhythm game. One afternoon, Miss Hargrove called me to say Zariah had comforted another student who cried after falling during recess. She knelt beside her, the teacher said, and said, "You're still strong, even when you're sad." I sat with that sentence the entire night. The judge's ruling had given us more than custody. It had given Zariah the space to rebuild. No more threats. No more forced weekends. Delilah had sent one letter through her lawyer, some vague attempt to request visitation through a family therapist. My lawyer advised we don't respond yet. The court had set the terms, no contact without therapeutic approval. And Zariah hadn't asked about her mother once. I didn't bring it up. I wouldn't. Not unless she did. Instead, I let her fill our home with color again. Books, music, laughter, and drawings taped to the fridge. Every night, she added another star to the chart on the wall. We stopped counting after 10. She said, "I don't need the stars anymore, Daddy. I know when I have a good day now." Then came the morning I found her brushing her new curls in the mirror. She turned to me and asked, "Do you think I'll ever grow it long again?" "Only if you want to." "I might," she said, twisting one soft curl between her fingers. "But I kinda like it like this." I smiled. "It suits you. It makes me feel fast," she said. "Like I can run faster and jump higher." I knelt beside her. "You can do anything now." She hugged me, tight and fierce. And in that moment, I knew something I hadn't dared believe weeks ago. She wasn't just healing. She was becoming. It had been 6 months since the court ruling, and life had folded into something close to peace. Not perfect, not easy, but quiet in the ways that mattered. Zariah was herself again. Not the version of her that had been bruised and careful, but the real one. The bright, goofy, unfiltered little force that colored outside the lines on purpose just to see what would happen. Her hair had grown into a halo of tight curls she wore like a crown. She didn't hide it anymore. She let the wind pull through it, let the sun warm her scalp, and sometimes, when the mood struck her, she'd accessorize with glittery clips that didn't match anything she was wearing. She liked it that way. She said it made her unpredictable. I told her it made her powerful. We had a new Saturday tradition: walks through Westbrook Park, hot chocolate from the corner cafe, and stopping by the lake to feed stale bread to ducks that never seemed to get full. That morning, the breeze carried the faint scent of popcorn from the vendor near the carousel. Zariah tugged on my sleeve as we crossed the path near the fountain. "Can we get the big bag this time?" she asked, her eyes wide. "I won't spill it. Promise." I grinned. "You say that every week, but I mean it this time." We got the big bag. She cradled it like treasure as we strolled toward the edge of the park. It was the kind of day that made it hard to remember how broken things had been until I saw her. Delilah, sitting outside a shuttered shop near the bus terminal, hunched over with a cracked paper cup between her hands. Her clothes were rumpled, her hair a dull brown now, roots showing. Makeup faded, lips dry. There was no sign of Gregory, no expensive stroller, no designer purse. Just Delilah, sitting on a milk crate, trying to stay invisible. I almost didn't recognize her, but Zariah did. She stopped mid-step, the popcorn bag crinkling in her hands. "Daddy," she whispered. I followed her gaze. Delilah shifted on the crate, her knees pulled tight together, her fingers curling around the rim of the cup. She looked up, eyes bloodshot, face pale, and then her expression changed. Not regret, not humility, bitterness. "This is what you wanted, right?" she muttered, her voice sharp and hoarse. "You finally win." I didn't answer. I didn't blink. Zariah's hand found mine, her fingers small but steady. Delilah's laugh came out jagged. "You took everything. My house, my money, my family, and now you get to walk around like the hero." Zariah didn't move. She was watching her mother like she was trying to make sense of what she saw, like part of her still expected something soft to emerge from the wreckage. But there was no softness left in Delilah. Whatever love she once had, whatever sense of motherhood she used to perform so convincingly, it had crumbled. "I didn't take anything," I said finally, my voice low. "You gave it up, piece by piece." Delilah scoffed. "You're so self-righteous. You think this makes you better." "No," I said. But it made her safer. I looked at Zariah then, and for the briefest moment, I saw her hesitate. Not out of fear, out of compassion. The part of her that still remembered lullabies and pancake sundaes. The part that wanted to believe people could change. I bent down and whispered, "Do you want to keep walking?" She looked up at me. "Can I give her something?" I blinked. "You don't have to, baby." "I know," she said, "but maybe she needs it." I reached into my pocket and pulled out a coin, an old silver one I'd found wedged in our couch cushions earlier that week. It had no real value, just one of those shiny pieces that felt lucky somehow. I handed it to her. She walked toward Delilah slowly, her small hand clutching the coin. The popcorn bag was pressed to her chest, like a shield. When she reached the cup, Delilah's eyes narrowed. "What's this? You pity me now." Zariah didn't flinch. She leaned forward, dropped the coin into the cup, and said, "Hope you feel better, ma'am." Ma'am. Not mom. Not mommy. Just ma'am. Then she turned and walked back to me. We kept walking. She didn't ask to talk about it. She didn't cry. She didn't even turn around. I watched her curls bounce with each step, her spine straight, her eyes ahead. There was something final in that walk. Something quiet but powerful. That was the moment she let go. And I knew she would never need to look back again. That night, we sat on the porch with mugs of warm cider. The stars had started to peek through the navy sky, and Zariah leaned against me, her voice barely louder than the breeze. "Do you think people always end up where they deserve to?" I looked down at her. "I think people end up where their choices lead them. Sometimes that's the same thing." She nodded slowly. She didn't say thank you. She might not know how. "I'm glad I did it anyway." "I am too." We stayed like that a while, watching the sky, letting the silence settle around us. Inside, her drawings lined the fridge, superheroes, rockets, girls with wings and swords and bright pink headbands. She started writing little stories to go with them. In one, a girl with glowing hair saved a town from sadness using only her voice. I asked her what her power was called. She smiled and said, "Truth." As the wind rustled the trees and the porch light buzzed above us, I realized something I hadn't before. Healing doesn't come all at once. It doesn't arrive like a package on your doorstep or some miracle epiphany that erases everything. It comes in pieces, in quiet moments, in brave walks, in coins dropped without expectations, in laughter that returns without warning. Delilah was gone. Maybe not forever, maybe not legally, but spiritually. She no longer held space in our home. And the version of me that used to tolerate her damage for the sake of peace, that version was gone too. Zariah had taught me what resilience looked like. Not the loud kind, not the rage or the vengeance, but the kind that wakes up each day and chooses to be soft in a world that tried to harden you. The kind that smiles even after someone tried to steal it. She yawned beside me. I scooped her up, carried her inside, and tucked her into bed. She didn't ask for the night light anymore. But I left it on anyway. As I turned off the hall light and walked to my own room, I thought about that coin. The way it had landed with a soft clink in Delilah's cup. Maybe she'd spend it. Maybe she'd throw it away. But maybe, just maybe, it would remind her, someday, that kindness didn't need a reason. And for Zariah, it reminded her that she was no one's victim. She was the one who had the last word. The one who walked away. Strong, whole, unbreakable, and free.